you this morning. And Lord, that we would unite our hearts and our minds around your Scriptures and study what it is that your Word has to say to us. Lord, thanks for a beautiful day and the opportunity to do this together, to know that you have created all of this for our benefit, that we would come to know you and have a relationship with you. Lord, thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. Go ahead and have a seat.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Molly Stotler, one of the team leaders, and I'm going to read our scripture for today. We are reading Proverbs 3, 1 through 6, and it says, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight."
Amen. Kiddos, you can head on back. It's a good thing, right? It's lots of fun to watch. We have been walking through all spring, of course, the story. If you haven't picked up a copy of that and you'd like to have a copy, there's some more copies of the book back there. We're going to jump back into that in September, okay? So we're going to pick up there at the New Testament portion of that. And so we're going to take a little break through the summer and just talk about some other things that some of you will be thankful we're not in the weeds talking about all of these Old Testament places and names and things, but the really important thing that you gathered from studying the Old Testament was how God's character was shown to His people. That over and over His faithfulness showed up. That God was who He said He was in Genesis and continues to be who He says He is right now today as we wait for His second coming. That nothing has changed about His character, that He is ever loving and ever powerful, and that we have an opportunity to have a relationship with Him. Not only that, but He desires it. That He pursues us, just like He pursued the nation of Israel. Over and over and over, He continued to pursue them no matter how far away they went. He chased them down. He gave them another chance. He showed grace and mercy and love, compassion, all of those things that are equivalent to His nature. We're going to take some time in the next few weeks and talk about relating biblically to God and to others. Just a few things that maybe we can do to understand the character and the nature of God, and how do we employ that then in our relationships with Him and with each other, inside the church and outside of the church. How do we do all of this together? And so this spring we tracked God's desires for His relationship with His people. Now we're going to start to shift and talk about how God's relationship desires us, and He pursues us, each individually. So I picked one of my favorite Psalms to start this morning, and we've used it before, and I've done some writing on it as well. And Psalm 139, in my opinion, gives us a great window into who God is and then who David sees God as. So David writes this psalm, and I hope that you see bits and pieces of David's story that maybe fit into your life as well. So let's start with Psalm 139, verses 1 to 6. O Lord, you have examined my heart. You know everything about me. You know when I sit down and stand up. You know my thoughts even when I am far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I am going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow after me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great to understand. Reading from the New Living Translation, it was one of the passages that I read this week that I just loved the way that he phrased some of the things. These first few verses that David writes acknowledge God's omniscience. We're going to talk about a couple of big words as we talk about God's character today. Omniscience is that He is all-knowing. So David first acknowledges His omniscience. He says, "You've examined my heart. You know everything about me." The relationship starts there, whether we want it to or not. God knows everything about us. We understand that if we know who God is, His character, and His timing. He sees it all. Whether we want Him to or not, He sees everything that we say, everything that we do. He even knows our thoughts before they are on our tongue, right? He understands all of that. One of the beautiful pictures here first, not only does He know all of those things about me, but He goes before me and then follows after me. He is in both places at one time. He goes to prepare what it is that I'm going to do and cleans up some of my mess, right? He helps get me through some of those things. It's not meant for us to understand. The psalmist here, David, says, "This knowledge is too wonderful for me." To think about the depth of how God knows us is too wonderful for us to even understand. That He even wants to know us at that level. It's too great for me to understand. But it's up to us to trust that that's His nature. That He wants and desires this relationship with us and continues to cultivate it over and over and over, no matter where we have been. Not only does He know our thoughts, but where we will think them. So moving on to verses 7 and through 12. "I can never escape from your Spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell in the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me, but the light around me shines bright as day. Even in the darkness I cannot hide from you. To you the night shines bright as day. Darkness and light are the same to you." Now he's writing about another word. He's omniscient, so He knows everything. He's all-knowing, knows everything that we're thinking, everything that we're doing, but He's also omnipresent. He's everywhere that we are at one time, in all places, at all times. It's hard for us to even fathom the possibility of a being that could do that and still want a relationship with us. That's the beautiful piece about what this is all about. David is recognizing that even though God is all-knowing and ever-present, He still wants a relationship with Him. He's acknowledging that no matter where I go, if I am going somewhere, God is already there providing for and caring for the situation. He's already there ahead of you. He's already known what you're up to and what it is that you're going to need. David says, "I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night." I could do all of those things, but He created everywhere that there is to hide from His presence. He created every place that we would want to hide. Even when we hide, we are drawing close to Him without knowing it. With Him having every thought of us and being in every place with us, that should give us pretty great comfort that we have a friend of God like that. That He does all of those things inside of this relationship with us. David is just kind of getting started. He writes again of God's omniscience, but this time His intimate knowledge of us individually. David talks about who God is, His omniscience and His all-present being, and then he takes it and personalizes it here in the next couple verses. Verses 13 to 18. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion. As I was woven together in the dark of the womb, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day passed away. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of the sand. And when I wake up, you are still with me. In your mother's womb, think about that. He uses the term, He knit me together, right? He put me together. He fabricated us individually when we were in utter seclusion. Now we can see things more than we ever have been able to before. 4D images and things like that. We get to see fingers and toes and noses more than any other generation in the past. But think about what God gets to see. Every nuance of development, He knew. He wove it together in utter seclusion. When no one else sees what's going on, God does. If He could do that before you were born, how intimately do you think He knows you now? Everything that you think about, everything that you say, every place that you go, everything that you are and in your mind are not, He knows. He knows how you were conceived. Think about that. He knows exactly what went on in that moment. No matter what your history is, He knows exactly why, when, and where you were brought to life. And the purpose that He had for you. He knit you together in your mother's womb so that you could be here today in this moment. The complexity of your body and mind, He knew well before you did. Every day recorded. It says He records it all in a book. And in my world, I love to read, and so the hopes is that one day I turn an entire room into a library, floor to ceiling. When I walk into that room, all I see is books. In my mind, that's what I'm visualizing here. That there are shelves and shelves of books with our name on the spines. That God has written your story already. He's encapsulated. He knew every moment of your life, and He encapsulated. He wrote it in His book. He counted every moment. Every day of our life was recorded. Every moment accounted for. He has that kind of knowledge about who you are. Who wouldn't want to have a relationship with somebody that knows you so well? If we understand His character from having read so many stories of how He worked in the past, who wouldn't want to know that God and have a relationship with them that's thriving on an intimate level? Do you realize that God thinks about you? This is one of the phrases, this is one of the realizations that I made as I read the different passages. This is the one that really struck me the most. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God? That God actually thinks about us. Not only that, but David says he can't even count the times God thinks about him. That were he to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand in our world. that God thinks about you a lot every day is a precious thought to hold dear, right? That He's always there, no matter what. If it's a passing moment when we're frustrated about something, we say, God, I don't understand. He's there. When we find ourselves in an intimate moment where we feel like, wow, I'm so thankful that just happened, He's there. All of those moments accounted every day, put in a book, as He thinks about you continually, day after day after day. Then David culminates in another word, His omniscience, His all-knowing, right? He has talked about omnipresence, that He's everywhere all the time. He knows everything, knows where it's going to happen, and He has complete control over it. So David at this point is now saying, Lord, you have enemies. I have enemies. I want you to use the most powerful characteristic you have, your omnipotence. You are all powerful. And so he's getting to the point where he's like, I know you and you know me. Why don't you just change the world that we live in? 19 to 24, David says, Oh God, if you would only destroy the wicked, get out of my life, you murderers. They blaspheme you. Your enemies misuse your name. Oh Lord, shouldn't I hate those who hate you? Shouldn't I despise those who oppose you? Yes, I hate them with total hatred, for your enemies are my enemies. David has become so closely linked to God that he sees when people misuse His name, and it's frustrating to him. He says, God, what good is omnipotence if you're not going to use it, right? Why don't you just wipe them out? Get them out of the road. Make everything peaceful for us. I have to be honest that I wouldn't be here today if that were the case. Because I started out this life as an enemy of God. That's all of our stories. The most wonderful thing about God's omnipotence is how He uses it. He puts up with me. That's real strength. He harnesses His power for my good. He allows this world to exist without being obliterated for the purpose that some will be saved, that they will understand what He's doing, that they will come to understand who He is and that He wants a relationship with each and every one of them. David ends with a passage that we probably all have heard many times, and really this is David's surrender to God. Finally, he talks about how powerful God is, how omnipresent, omniscient, all of those pieces of God's character, and finally he surrenders his will. In my mind, he's just frustrated. He vents all of this to God. Why don't you take care of my enemies? And then he sits down and says, but I surrender to you. I surrender my will. I say, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. David is saying, comb through my life. I want to be faithful. I want to prove it. I need you to search out those ways that I am not being faithful to you. I even want you to know my fears, God. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Know the things that worry me, God. I want to give that to you. David, a man after God's own heart, writes these words David, we know, had baggage. David had been chased by a murderous king. He knew of enemies within and without. David knew what it was like to rise and be a powerful leader of God's chosen people, but he also knew what it meant to fall. He knew what it meant to sin. He committed adultery and murder. He lied. And yet, this is how intimate his relationship is with God. He says to God, point out anything in me that offends you. God, tell me what it is that I do that hurts you. I want you to have that freedom, God. I want to surrender my will utterly and completely to you in a relationship that only benefits me. You see, we can't add or give anything to God. But the more and more we surrender to Him, the more care and concern that He gets to show in our lives because we listen to what it is that He's saying to us. Then that last phrase, lead me along the path of everlasting life. Let me tag along forever. Just let me be a part of it, Lord. Take my hand. Lead me along the path of everlasting life. Take me to a place where it's just you and me in relationship forever. This relationship with God that David wanted and had at times. He was a man after God's own heart. We see it over and over throughout his life. It's emphasized in the Psalms particularly, but also in some of the other writings through Samuel and others when you see how God empowered him to do some of the things that he did. He was with him, leading him and guiding him, protecting him in all situations. There was a relationship, totally beneficial to David. There's a summary sheet of some things that I want to pass around. I'm going to send you out with homework. I know. You're looking at me like, yeah, sure. I know it's summer break and all. But this is a summary sheet because I feel like it's so important for us to understand. We talked about God's relationship with the nation of Israel, right? And how He pursued them. But we live in a different part of the covenant. We live in a different place in our world where God has individually extended His Son Jesus to our lives so that we have an individual relationship with Him. And so it matters how we spend our time. And David writes this psalm from a deep place of understanding who God is and what He has done for him. And so we have the same opportunity. And what this is really a synopsis of a book by Gary Thomas. If you want the book, it's Gary Thomas, Sacred Pathways. It's ways in which you can use what it is that God has done in your life, how He has uniquely designed and created you to foster a relationship with Him. You see, if you really believe that He knew you in your mother's womb and He knows you intimately, then He uniquely designed you the way you are, and there is a way that you connect to God that someone else might not. That's the way it works. And so here is just some suggestions that Gary Thomas has come up with to give you some ways to practice a relationship with God. We can talk about it all we want in the Old Testament and His character, His nature, and His pursuit of Israel, but unless we put it into practice individually, I feel like we've missed it. And so these sacred pathways are ways that you can connect with God. The first one right there, and I'm not going to go through them all, just a couple of them, snapshots to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. A naturalist. If you know anything about me, then you know this is a category that I fit in. All right? I love God by being out of doors. Anything outside. I love to go outside and spend time hiking and fishing and hunting and doing those kinds of things, to be in silence with Him. For me, I'm a naturalist. One of my favorite times of the year is when I get to sit in a tree stand and the loudest thing that I hear is a leaf falling off the tree. Did you know that you can hear individual leaves falling? Find a place where it's that quiet. It's pretty amazing. I love to love God that way. Getting in those environments and just contemplating and being moved by His creation. Lots of other people do that as well. Romans chapter 1 tells us that we are without excuse in our world. If you look around you, you will see God. It's impossible to deny Him. We try really hard to. Maybe you are more of an activist. This is kind of the other side of the coin. I love to retreat to the mountains and the streams. Other people are activists. They like to take up causes. That's why the Right to Life and the March for Life in Washington, D.C. exists. Things like that. There are people that want to put their faith in action. Maybe you need to love God by mobilizing the passion that you have inside of you for doing some of those kinds of things. That's how you express your relationship with God. This doesn't have to be one size fits all. Just reading the Bible through in a year doesn't fit everybody's mindset. For me, I can't do that. That's too many bites. It takes me a long time to chew it. So I want to take smaller bites and sit there for a couple of hours and just think about what I've read. That's what a contemplate does down here later on the list. How about caregivers? Loving God by caring for other people. It takes a special person to do that. One story, Carol, the gal that we're praying for that's having her hip replaced. She came to church here a couple of years ago, and one of her heart's desires is to make cards. So one of the favorite things she does is sits in her little home and she makes these beautiful cards. She comes to me and she says, Doug, I make these cards and I just want to be able to send them to people. Is that okay? I said, of course, Carol. Send cards, because I can't. I'm terrible at it. Send cards to people. All I need to do is provide an address list, and she does what she was designed to do in the body. And that's her way of loving God. That's how the body is supposed to work. That we do these things together. Contemplates down here is the other one that for me fits with the naturalist. So there's a place that I go to, and this ties into finding your Gethsemane at the very end there. For me, this is a particular place and time at times. We go to Ohiopyle State Park, and then Laurel Highlands Trail starts there. And about almost 3 miles in, there is a giant rock that protrudes from the trail. And it overlooks the Youghiogheny River. And so for me, one of my best days would be to just go down there, hike up to that rock, and just sit there, admiring creation, being with God, and contemplating and loving Him for who He is and what He's done. Those are life-giving moments for me. All of these things have different meanings and different purposes, maybe for your life. The enthusiast on this list. If you read a story that's encapsulated in 2 Samuel here, you'll see David, the guy that wrote this psalm. The Ark of the Covenant is being returned to the city, and he's so happy that the Ark of the Covenant is being returned that he's dancing before God. He's dancing in the street enthusiastically, so much so that his wife, looking from above, thinks he looks like an idiot. And she tells him so. He comes home and she says, How dignified was that for the king to be dancing like that? His response was, you haven't seen anything yet. If you think that's how undignified I'll get to celebrate my God, you've got another thing coming. He was willing to ratchet up his enthusiasm for God. We don't clap a whole lot here. That's okay. But we could do a little more. It's all right. To be enthusiastic about who God is and who He's made you to be is okay. That's a good thing. As long as we are keeping it in the boundaries of celebrating who God is. Each one of these also has a temptation to make it about ourselves. If we continue to focus and make these things about who God has made us to be and how we enjoy His life-giving times with us, then we will be a body that are really connected to who God is and what He's doing in our world. So this homework is really about you taking it home and thinking about your personality. You see the 16personalities.com at the very top. That's an easy personality interview. If you've never gone through a personality inventory, do that too. It's kind of fun to figure out and go, wow, that computer knows a lot about me. It's kind of scary. There are certain personalities and traits and things that will then lead you to maybe figuring out where you fit in this list a little bit and practice some of them. Read some of the other characters that celebrated God the way they were created to do it. Read through this list and see David. Read Jesus as He gives for people, right? Jesus healed all the sick. You think He wasn't overwhelmed? You've watched The Chosen and seen parts of it where the large crowds gather, and the first thing is that Jesus did what? He had compassion on them. It moved His heart. You're full of empathy. That's good. Use it. Celebrate it. Allow yourself to be drawn into a relationship with God where He uses you to be empathetic in situations. Take this home, read it, digest it. If you want to get the book, I included the title and the name there. And then the last piece there is to find a Gethsemane. Find a place. Folks, I would encourage you to do this regularly. I wrote in there, this is not a good practice just when you need it. All right? Usually it's too late. If we've figured out that we need it, it's too late. Do it regularly so that when life does throw things at you, your heart and your mind and your soul are refreshed and prepared for the opportunity to act the way you want to act, not how you react. This is intentional. Spending time with God will help you create some margin in your life to be prepared for what it is that God is throwing at you. Remember, He knows everything. He is everywhere, and He has all the power at His disposal. Why not tap into that source over and over and over for our benefit? That's what He wants from us. You see, most of the other religions in the world, it's about what we have to do for the deity. Christianity is entirely different. It's all about what God has already done for us. We just get to tag along. We get to be led along the path to everlasting life. Take the walk with Him. You won't regret it. Father, thank You for Your Word. Lord, thank You for David and for using him as an instrument to write to our hearts. Lord, I pray that we would utilize our giftedness, that we would utilize the unique way You've crafted each one of us to glorify You. That everything You've given to us and used through us would then come back to You. Lord, thank You so much. Lord, I pray that You would give us a good week, that we would understand a little more about who we are and who we can be if we join You in what it is You're doing in our world. Lord, I pray that You would touch each and every one of our hearts in a way this week that gives us an opportunity to know You more. Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for pursuing us. In Jesus' name, amen.